right, so I have a caveat. Caveat is I just wrapped up this talk at 6 in the morning, climbed into bed, and awoke rushing to the train station to get up here. Then I realized once I got up here that there was no Uber or Lyft nearby. So I had to huff it from the train station, so I'm all hot and bothered right now. But anyway, so I only had time to do the talk in Markdown. Is that okay with everybody? No, I'm just kidding. That's terrible. What kind of professional speaker is this guy? All right, let's run a little tool here. Some of you may have seen me run something like this in Python many years ago, where I wrote a Python script that parses markup text, and it would launch PowerPoint, ingest the entire thing in, and put a template on it, and then start the slideshow. So now I've upgraded. Well, I should say I downgraded to a JavaScript tool that does this, but for Google Slides. So if y'all want this tool, it's called Markdown to Google Slides. One of my colleagues wrote it. So you can actually write an entire presentation in plain text very quickly on a plane or on a train, and then have it auto-generate. I mean, the template's not so pretty, so I'm just going to pick something. Hopefully it's something that you can see easily. Let's just, which one do you guys like? I don't know, maybe, how about this purple one? Is there one with Comic Sans on it? No, that's for a different speaker. All right, so I actually have two talks. I'm actually here sort of in two capacities. One is I'm a representative of the Python community. And the other reason why I'm here is, as Chris mentioned, I work at Google now. And we actually do have a chatbot product. So I'm going to switch gears and put on my work shirt halfway through this talk. Okay? But let's get started. I'm not going to introduce myself because many of you already know who I am. If you don't know who I am, just like search for Core Python in Amazon, you'll find me. If you actually do a generic Google search, you'll probably find a lot of my videos because I actually do that for work. I make videos to show people how to code Google technologies using Python, JavaScript, and things like that. So I have no private life, so it's okay. So about this talk, it's all about writing a bot, chatbot. What's a, we first have to answer the question, what is a bot? There's many answers, actually. People, when they say the word bot, you don't really know what they're talking about until you hear more context. So it's actually a term that's used very generically, and it could mean lots of different things. And then, of course, we'll get to the reason why you're here or why I'm giving the talk here at PyBay, and that is how can you code this stuff in Python, and then I'll wrap up. OK, so you want to write a bot. What the heck is a bot? Is it something you talk to with your voice? Is it something you chat with in a chat application? Is it some Russian political hate monger? Is it a microservice utility app? OK. So of course, you know the answer is on the next line, which is it's all of the above. So CNET has a pretty interesting quote about what they feel a bot is. And generically, what they're saying is that it's some code online somewhere that automates a task. And generally for utility purposes, and not necessarily for evil. But sometimes people do that because bots are written by humans, not by other bots. That would be very meta, actually. I'm sure that will be coming along soon, bots written by bots. All right, so how did this all get started? It really got started with sort of like the proliferation of messaging apps everywhere. I mean, we used to use, well, I shouldn't say IRC. There were many systems before IRC that were chat related. In fact, when I was an undergraduate, many, many years ago, before most of you were born, one of our projects in operating system class was to write something like a chat room. We had like a lobby that everybody entered in, and everyone who was participating in this group chat would all enter into the lobby, and then you can choose to go with some of your, quote, friends or contacts that you made there and create another room with them in it along with yourself. And then when people left that room, well, actually, when everybody left the room and it had 0 occupants, then the room was automatically deleted. So this was way back in the 1900s, somewhere in the 1900s. Not 1900, but somewhere later in the 1900s. So that sort of like was the beginning of chat. The internet wasn't like everywhere yet. Back then, I'm aging myself now. I'm giving you guys a hint. Back then, there was only dial-up. Okay, how many people remember 300 baud modems? Oh my God. Okay, you're not as young as you look. Well, you're all aged well, okay? But 300 led way to 1200, 2400, 4800. Who had a 9600 baud modem? Awesome. Okay, cool. And so, of course, as things got faster, then more things showed up online. And the web showed up as well, too, in the 90s. Before that, we used to have a lot of command line tools. But anyway, so moving, fast forwarding to the modern generation, we have a lot of apps where people are talking to each other. And throughout the course of all of these, people wanted to have something done for them while they're in the chat room. If you're there, you're talking to people, you can ask your friend who's in the chat room, who's actually sitting downstairs, or your colleague who's sitting downstairs, you're chatting with them, they're saying, hey, I'm going to go out, I'm going to go to the coffee shop and grab a couple of coffees. Do you want something? And you would say yes, and they would go downstairs to Starbucks or Pete's, grab some stuff for you, and then bring it to your floor and give it to you, right? So that made people think, wait a minute, if we can do automation with humans, can't we do, don't we have tasks that we do on the computer and we repeat them over and over again? Or maybe they're kind of difficult to put together. I wish I put this in the slide deck, but I can probably do an internet search to find it. But we'll get to this when I get to the Hangouts Chat part of the talk. But there was an example given by a CIO who was sort of testing out writing bots using Google's new bot platform. And what he said was, okay, so he works at Motorola, and they ship electronic devices. Who knew, right? And when a customer calls in, the person who's the customer service rep has to ask the user for their name, their email address, probably the serial number for their device. Then they have to find out, is their device under warranty? And if it is, how much, has it expired yet? Is there a warranty, for one? And two, is it still valid? And then the phone call can progress. So what he did was he wrote a little chatbot that actually went around to different systems, that got the model numbers, that had warranty information, and then had some calendaring application to sort of determine whether or not this thing was valid. And with just a few clicks, with just a command giving the person's serial number, he was able to look all this stuff up from 3 different systems, put it all together, and send that directly to the customer service representative, who was able to respond to the customer quicker than if he had to log in or she had to log into 3 different systems and kind of correlate, right? So the utility of this has, is really what made bots sort of really come into being, and that is doing monotonous stuff, things that are repetitive, like short lookup things, right? All these things led to where we are today. All right, so I guess I just sort of did this slide already, but the main idea is automation needs arose to help answer customer questions, to automate repetitive tasks that really would take effort human-wise, and effort that you really shouldn't have to be doing. Maybe you can spend more time improving your application. Maybe you should be refactoring your app. You shouldn't be digging around the minutia of pulling information from different systems together just to collate and then give it to somebody else when a machine can do it faster. Right? It's the same reason why we have a calculator instead of doing math by hand, or an abacus was already faster than doing it by hand, but a calculator is even faster, right? So these things we could do as a human, but maybe it's better if this was done electronically somehow. Okay? And then the third bullet up there is where I mentioned you're putting things together collected from different sources. So your data's not all in one place. You'd be lucky if everything that you needed to run a company was in one database, right? That just doesn't happen, okay? So really the main idea is to sort of reduce human manual labor so that you can do better things with your time, so that you could improve your app, you can write new apps and things like that. So generally these things that you want a bot to do doesn't take much time, because when you're sending a chat message to a bot, you want to get a response as quickly as possible. You don't want to send a message and it's waiting for a cup of coffee, right? You'd have to go to the bathroom and get a snack and then come back and your coffee will be done or something like that, right? So it has to be something that has a short time span. It also shouldn't take too much effort. I mean, you could make bots do lots of complicated things, but the more things you have it do, the longer it takes for the response to come back. So you don't want that to happen either, because the time and the effort, they're somewhat tied together. And of course, all this beats doing it manually, which is the worst thing to do. So a bot can simulate human activity and possibly make it a little bit conversational. That doesn't have to be the case, but the more conversational it is, the easier it is for a human to communicate with the bot. Okay, so there's two types of bots. There are the simple bots. These things are generally text only. They have a very limited vocabulary, such as the ones that I wrote that I'm going to show you in a moment. There's not a lot of smarts to them, and the responses are fairly limited because it can't really do too much. It doesn't know too much, and it can't really do too much. It's very primitive, but it does do the job for whatever job that you choose to give it. And those jobs are usually from sort of like a fixed set. It's not, it can't go and guess. Unless, of course, you started to expand the functionality, in which case, at some point, if you keep on adding features to your simple bot, it's going to become a smart bot, because you would have added some sort of natural language processing so that as humans, we can talk to it more easily. So some sort of natural language processing, and then, of course, you can use machine language and AI for natural language understanding. Okay, so this leads to like more human-like communication. It's easier for humans to talk to them, and then of course you can have more functionality because of this. You just have to be able to sort of like figure out what is it that what does this human want? Oh my God, he wants me to order another coffee for them. It's the same damn thing every single day. Okay, so right, so the more code you put into it, the more complex your bot can be, and it could be it's very likely that the more things it can do, the smarter that it is, the cooler that the bot is, okay, quote unquote. All right, so what can bots do? Generally, bots these days will answer questions. They'll perform some sort of e-commerce, helping you, complete your shopping or helping you with shopping. So, for example, if you had a question about, should I buy this thing or this similar competing product? Obviously, the bot can look at simple things like pricing, but a smarter bot would sort of try and figure out what is the product that better fits your needs, and also keep in mind budget as well, right? You can, bots, if you code them well enough, can take lots of hints from the user as to what they want, and then you can make suggestions. That's why a lot of shopping companies, including Amazon and others, have recommendations because they know what you bought before. They have a vague idea as to the things that you've bought in the past, the interests that you have, as well as the things that you're searching for. So all those things are like signals as to what your shopping patterns are, and then it can make suggestions for you. You can also book, make bookings, whether it be travel or it could be dining, it could be things like that. Especially if a bot has access to your calendar. So one of the, so for the new Google bot platform, one of my colleagues wrote a bot where the 7 people who are in the chat room, all of a sudden, the chatting is good, but we really need to get our heads together and figure something out. So he wrote a bot that looked at everybody's calendars and proposed the first meeting times where everybody's available, and you pick one and then you pick the conference room and then you're done. So something like that, it's pretty useful, right? It's like having sort of like a secretary do that sort of like manual labor for you so that you don't have to. I already mentioned the example of collecting information from different resources, putting them together and presenting them to a user, a customer, or whatnot. Of course, that is related to customer service. I already gave you that example. And of course, since you're logged into whatever chat app you're using, a bot could personalize responses just for you, just for your shopping habits, or for things that you've searched for in the past, things of that nature. And of course, I already mentioned automating tasks. All right. So how do you write chatbots in Python? Probably the two that I know the best are Slack and Hangouts Chat from Google. So I'll discuss these two. I will show you some code later. I want to get through the talk first. So Slack has a whole bunch of services. So I would say they're the most. Does anybody work for Slack here? Just curious. Because you can correct me if I'm wrong, or nobody. People too shy. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so to me, Slack is the most fully featured bot service. There's various APIs that can do lots of different things for you. It all depends on what your application is, what you're looking to do, and how you want to interact with the chat platform. So the web API is just generic HTTP REST-based RPC-style methods that, I want to make a call to check if I'm a valid user. I want to get a list of all the users in this channel. I want to do this. I want to do that. So you make a request. Seems like you could write a bot to do this. So that's the web API. The RTM API, the real-time messaging API, is a WebSocket-based service, and it is the fire hose. If you want to know everything that's happening in a channel on Slack, use RTM. It knows when a user is typing, so it'll show that little thing that shows that someone's typing. It'll tell you when a message is sent. It'll tell you when a user is joined. It tells you when somebody leaves. It all happens. It comes in as it happens. You actually have to put a pause in there to slow it down so that you can just pick stuff off one bit at a time. So if you want everything, that's what the RTM API is for. The demo that I'm going to show is the Events API, because that's the most similar to how the Google Hangouts chat service works. So this is where you have a bot. It's an endpoint. It's hosted somewhere, anywhere. You build it in any language you want. You host it, in any. You use any stack to build it. You host it on any cloud. You host it on-prem or in a public cloud as well. And the whole idea is when a message comes in or some event happens, the Slack service will then post to your bot. And then your bot will do whatever work it needs to do, and then it returns the message, and it posts a response message back into the chat room. So that's how the Events API works. By the way, when you go and create a Slack application, you have to sort of register which APIs you want to use. Then you have to make sure you have all your credentials. So there's a lot of security involved, which is great. So real time means you're connected and you get everything. You're always connected. It's like Big Brother is always listening. You can think of it that way. You're just always hooked into it. But events are where you sort of pick and choose the things that you're interested in and be notified when those particular things happen. And there's a lot of different events you can choose from. I don't know if it's everything that RTM gives you, but the most important things are definitely covered by events. Then there are the slash commands. So a lot of you are aware that when when you're in a chat room, you can do /help, /info, /whatnot. And what's really cool is that Slack has some infrastructure for you. So you just define the specific methods that are called anytime one of these commands come in. And these commands don't even count. You don't even get penalized. They don't even count as a message. They're just a Slack command. So if you had, not that you would have a quota of how many messages, but it doesn't come through like a message would. So it's a different kind of event. And then one of the last APIs I want to talk about is incoming webhooks, where if all of a sudden you want to post something into a Slack channel because a user requested some information. It took a long time to get this information, and then you can't send a response right away. So you would go do all your work and then post a message back into this chat room later. Or if you're in DevOps or a sysadmin, it might be good to know if your server goes down. That happens sort of occasionally, and so you want to be alerted in the chat room. Maybe all the admins are in one chat room or on a single channel, and then you can post an incoming webhook directly to that channel whenever something bad happens or whatnot. So there's a lot of variety for you to choose from. All right, so I'll show you the example afterwards. Let's just do the talk because I want to get through all the slides. Do we have till 12:20 something? That's right. Okay, great, awesome. I will try to let you all out early. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. So I'm now wearing my work shirt. See, I'm wearing my work shirt. My Python shirt is on the back. Okay, so I had to wear this shirt because this is a half and half deal. Okay, Hangouts Chat. And I think I'm going to switch to a different slide deck. Yep. Because I have to do this for work, right? So I already have the slide deck already done. All right. Okay, so apologies if it looks corporate-y. Okay, required to do that. All right, so Hangouts Chat. One of the products my team supports. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself earlier. blah, 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 marketing stuff. I do videos, I already told you that. Anytime you see a blue box, by the way, that means there's a video for it. We have a bunch of blogs, a bunch of Twitters. I've been a software engineer for 20 plus years. As Chris said, I was one of the original 10 engineers that built Yahoo Mail many years ago. In fact, it was exactly 20 years ago. So we're having our 20-year anniversary in October. So in 2 months, we're all going to get together. We're all going to be a little older, a little whiter, and a little wider, probably. And if you know core Python books, I'm still working on another one. It seems like I never stop working on it, because as soon as I'm done with one, my publisher wants me to update another one. So it's kind of like an ongoing saga. Also been teaching since, oh, dang, I put a year there. Just pretend you don't see the year, but I've been teaching for a long time. So hopefully most of you were born before that, okay? I usually just say Return of the Jedi and let people kind of guess. And then I'm also part of the PSF. All right, so Hangouts Chat, as I mentioned, launched in March. Well, technically February 28th, but you know, I don't really count that day, so March 1st. It is available for G Suite customers, so if you have a free Gmail account, you're using Classic Hangouts. We haven't made that available for non-paying customers yet, so who knows? People are complaining, and so that means at some point there'll be enough complaints where we actually make it available for everybody. But it's really tricky because Hangouts Chat, this product is made for sort of like team collaboration, so it makes more sense in a work environment. It's not sort of like a generic chat type tool, and I'll show you what I mean. You can build chatbots to automate workflows, query for information, do other heavy lifting, and there's lots of development hosting options. So this is mostly related to what I said earlier in the talk, and that is that bots are very utility oriented. They're generally microservice utility apps. That's usually how I kind of like describe it. And it allows you to do something without leaving the chat room. It allows you to get work done, accomplish something, get some information, process data. I mean, I can do a whole bunch of different stuff with chatbots. I just don't have time to go and write them. So anyway. And the other thing that's different about the new Hangouts Chat versus existing Hangouts is that not only can you do bots, but also you can create rooms for people. So there's that concept where you can have sales team in a room, marketing team in a room, all employees in a larger room, things of that nature. So I mentioned simple bots and smart bots, and generally simple bots are text only. It's very, very quick. The payload is very light. And they just give you the basics that you need to know. So here's an example of moving a meeting. All right, it knows how to check calendars, and it's able to respond fairly quickly. So that's a simple bot. I also mentioned smart bots have more ML, more AI, but somewhere in between, you can also have simple bots, but have better user interfaces than just plain text. Okay, so the Hangouts Chat product supports interactive cards. All you have to do is put together these cards using some JSON markup. And then you can have sort of like, a contact card that you see kind of like up here. You can have sort of like, here's a project management bot where the manager wants to find out, so what are the tasks that one of my reports has? And it shows what her current 5 tasks are and which ones have been done. And then if you want to, this is, if you look at it, you can kind of get a feeling that this is sort of like a short, quick, express version of a larger app that does project management. And then you have the option to actually open the full-on app or something like that. I mean, I think this is just a mock-up, but I'm sure there's tools like this out there. And then, of course, you can also add multimedia in it. You can put like videos in it. You can put images. You can have buttons that people can press. So this is just sort of like a restaurant lookup thing. So yeah. So somewhere, and then so these could be simple or smart bots. It's just that the user interface is a little bit more complex, and it looks more pleasing to the to the eye than just plain text. So just like Slack, Hangouts Chat is multi-tiered. Do I have a bigger image? No, I don't. Okay, so forget about the top and the bottom, because this is basically when a bot gets added to a space, it just sends the welcome message, and then when a bot gets removed from a space, nothing comes into the chat room because the bot's already been removed. So the main thing is messages. So regular messages are in the rectangle in the middle, where a user types a message into the chat room. Hangouts Chat receives that message, and then it forwards it to whatever the bot is. The bot gets the information, processes the request, and then sends a response back to the chat service, which then renders that message in the chat room. So it's a multi-tiered service. And by the way, the responses can be synchronous, so this is a synchronous response, or they can be asynchronous like the incoming webhook example I described earlier. So Hangouts Chat also supports incoming webhooks, so I'll show you an example piece of code with that. So let's take a look at our first Python app. So this is your hello world. It's the Echo bot in App Engine Python Web App 2, but easily ported to Flask. I actually have a Flask version of this as well. I should have showed that instead of this one. The only difference is that Web App 2 is the micro framework that comes with App Engine, so you don't have to actually upload like all of Flask. So I think if you do upload Flask, Flask has a whole bunch of other dependencies, and all those have to upload as well too. And so there's a little bit more code. So that's why I think I chose the Web App 2 version. But the Flask one, you can mentally kind of port this to Flask already, right? Everybody out there? Okay, yeah. So all this does is whatever you type, it just spits back what you type. So it's pretty basic. The request comes in from the Hangouts Chat service. I check the event type. Is it message, which is basically this middle thingy here. If it's one of the, if it's added to space or removed from space, that's a different one, and I ignore all of those. I only have one if statement. I ignore anything that's not a message. Okay, and all I do is hi, and then I get the username for the, for whoever sent it, and then it regurgitates what they typed in, and then convert it back to JSON and send it back to Hangouts Chat. So this is synchronous because it gets the response from the request from the user, and then it responds right away, all in the same HTTP response. So there's no need to use the API. There is no Hangouts Chat API call here, right? It's just a standard HTTP response. And then, of course, this is just the infinite server that starts up the website. And I think this is the first video that I made for this product when it launched sometime in March or so you can watch that if you're curious. So asynchronous messages. So this is where I mentioned, just like with the incoming webhooks for Slack, this is sort of like, this leads into the Google version of it, which is you've got long-running tasks, or you need to get out-of-band notifications from a bot, or things that are not bots. So, okay. And it also works with threaded conversations, so I hope I can explain that third bullet once we get to the code. The one difference is that now that your bot is just going to randomly send a message to Hangouts Chat, you do have to be authorized. So you have to go through the OAuth 2 flow in order to make it happen. Since a bot will never be a human user, you're not going to get presented with the OAuth 2 prompt, and you have to accept it because this is a bot, not a human. So you have to use a service account. If you've ever coded Google APIs before or used the cloud service, then you know what a service account is. It's basically an application that's responding on behalf of a user. Okay. So that code looks something like this. You need a permission scope. And that scope comes with the service account credentials when you create the service account. So all I do here on this line is to create a service endpoint to the Hangouts Chat API. And then I just pass it, I create a HTTP client, and then I sign it with the credentials that came with the service account. And then now I'm good to go. Obviously, if I didn't have valid credentials, I would get an exception thrown somewhere up here, and I wouldn't go on. But once we get past this, then we know we're valid. So every direct message or room in Hangouts Chat has an ID associated with it. So you just put the ID of the room there, and then you enter what the message is, and then you just call the API, chat spaces messages, create this message into this room, and the body is this message, and then just execute that call. So this is an asynchronous message, which is different from the original example I showed here, which is a synchronous response. Okay, and so basically this is, so this is bot code that will periodically send messages into a chat room. Now you can combine them together into one single app. You can have one where the human gets a response right away, but then you could also have another method call somewhere that will send a message asynchronously into the chat room at any time from the app. It doesn't really matter. All right. There's another use case, and that is an incoming webhook. And this is from things that are not bots, such as the server monitoring app that I mentioned before. So if you need to immediately send something into a chat room, just like with Slack, you can create an incoming webhook, and you do that when you configure your chat room. You can actually create and manage incoming webhooks. And then from there, once you create one specifically for this app, then you paste the long URL, which has all the authentication built into it. Okay, so don't give out that URL, right? Because it's like an API key. If other people get a hold of it, then they could spam the heck out of your chat room. So you don't want that to happen. It'll use up your quota. It's really bad. So you have to keep it in a secure place. That's why I have ... so you can't see this. Although it'd be kind of crazy to type in a large hex number anyway, right? So anyway, so it's much easier than using the API. You have, like I said, all the authorization is built into the URL. You come up with the message, whatever it is, and then you just use, request a standard, HTTP call from Python, and it's a post, and you pass in the data, and then convert it to JSON, and that's it. In fact, since all you need to do is post with an incoming webhook, you don't really even have to have code. You can actually do it from the command line using curl. So here's the exact same command as that, yeah, using curl. You don't need to write code at all. Let me see if I have a slide here. Okay, I don't have the slide because this is a short talk. So you see this thread key here. So earlier I mentioned you can have threaded conversations. So you saw those pretty user interfaces that you could make, right? What if for every single message you created a card and another card and another card and another card? Pretty soon your whole chat room will be full of cards, and it's pretty ugly, right? When on the slide where I talked about how you can have multimedia on the card, you can have a fancy formatted user interface type of thing. The third bullet on that slide says you can have threaded conversations, and these cards are interactive. So that's what this thread key is about. So what happens is when you come up with a card, maybe it's like status of a server. And every time, every 15 minutes, you don't want another card to show the status of the same server, right? So with the thread key, if you actually use thread key in your request, that will actually update the existing card that's already in the chat room. So if you're monitoring a server, it's just going to update that card UI, the content of the UI, instead of creating a brand new card and making everything scroll kind of ugly. So that's one of the cool things about Hangouts Chat, is that you can actually do thread keys to kind of lock things to a single threaded conversation. And then the second video I made for Hangouts Chat is about asynchronous. All right, and then as I mentioned before, just like with Slack, Hangouts Chat allows you to write bots in any technology. You can write it in any language you want, run it on write it on any stack, host it on any server. So Google has a whole bunch of stuff in the cloud platform, or things that are not in the cloud platform, like AppScript, or you can actually write bots and have them run. As long as you can HTTP post to it, it doesn't really matter what you use. It's very flexible. Okay, and then just in case you want to monetize and make your bot be available to lots of users, you can list it in the G Suite marketplace, because that's where you can actually have a significant number of users. I don't know if you could squint to see the number of users in here for these bots. They have, well, this is kind of like a mock-up, but it has a fake number of users. It could be into the millions, because for like a real extension that I find in the marketplace, the one that's the most popular is for Google Sheets. It basically adds a lot of features to Google Sheets, and they have like 8.25 million installed users. So it doesn't, you can make a living doing this, right? So anyway, so that's it for this. I think we just have enough time for the code, which is great. So what else? Probably if you want to get started with the Hangouts chatbots, you can do it in AppScript. It's basically sort of like a customized version of JavaScript. We don't have a code lab for Python at this time, just because usually Python people don't need as much hand-holding. But people who are not coders all the time, that work sort of consistently in the G Suite environment, it's easier for them to use AppScript instead, because they don't have to worry about OAuth or anything like that. So anyway, so that's that. And so I'm not done with the talk yet. I'm just done with this part of the talk. I'm going to go back to the main talk, and then hopefully we can look at some bots. Okay, so what do I have here? All right, let's show some examples. So I wrote actually there's so many different examples. I have to figure out what I want to show you all. Let's show you some code. Let's go back to this one. I have some code after this. So let's see what I have. Okay, so let's look at the hello world for Slack. So this is using the RTM, real-time messaging API. It's kind of like the Echo bot, all right? So the way it works is you have to pip install the Slack client, and then you have to get your authentication token. And generally, they recommend that you put it in an environment variable. I can't spell when I'm sleepy. I just stuck it in a settings.py file that I had locally because that's all I mentally could do. So you can create a Slack client, and then I can just like make a call to get all the users. And if the call to users is successful, that means I was able to actually make an API call to Slack, so that's good. So then I'm going to connect with the real-time API. And then what I do is I collect all the users and put ID to name, display name. So I'm saving that for later. And then what I do is I get the user ID for the actual bot. Why? I'm not sure because I don't use that later. I think I probably pasted this from a larger app that had more stuff in it. Yeah. Anyway, so I enter the infinite loop, and then I'm just constantly reading from the fire hose. And if, for whatever event I get, if it happens to be a message from a user, then I'll do hi, you send. So this is identical to the Hangouts Chat version. Now, instead of a user ID, which is not as friendly, I actually go and get their display name. And then the text that they sent in, and then I post the message back to the chat room, and then I sleep for a second and go back and look for another event. Okay, fairly basic. It's not hard. There's a whole ton of tutorials on how to do Slack bots in Python online, so feel free to check them out. I'm not going to repeat their work, but it'll be some sort of derivative of this. Once you see this, you can pretend it's pseudocode, because I think the bots that people write in their blog posts are a little bit more fully featured. Okay, so we're not going to do Dialogflow yet, but I'm going to talk about it. So let's move to that. I'll leave that here. I'll come back with more examples, and I will finish in 7 minutes. So that's a Slack example. You saw a Hangouts Chat example. We'll do a multi-bot example. Before we do the multi-bot, let's do that last. Let's talk about when would you use Slack versus Hangouts Chat. It depends on your use case. If you're looking for general purpose flexible bots with lots of features and choices into like how you can build your bot, you're probably going to use Slack. If you are working at a company where you are G Suite users, Gmail, Google Drive, Calendar, DocSheet, Slides, and you want to easily get access to that data because you want to do stuff for them like look stuff up in their calendars, book meetings for them, send them email reminders, add a file to their Google Drive, or read some data that's on the Teams Google Drive. And so that's tied to like not only G Suite data, but other Google services like what's in cloud, then you may want to consider Hangouts Chat. It doesn't have as many features as Slack, but the purpose of it, it's not, a lot of, the media like to say, oh, they're competitors or whatever, or Hangouts Chat's a Slack killer or whatever. It's not really the case. They have sort of like different markets, as you can probably already guess based on how I'm describing them. So it all depends on what you're building, okay? So what is this about Dialogflow? Because every time you look up bots, you see this thing called Dialogflow, which used to be called API.ai. Everyone's heard of this? Okay, so can we build slots with this too, or bots with this too? Kind of yes, kind of no. What is it really? It's a natural language understanding platform, and it basically lets you sort of like build more conversational user interfaces for bots. Okay, you can use Dialogflow for Slack, and you can use Dialogflow for Hangouts Chat. It's sort of like a higher layer. Its purpose is to help make your bot act more like a human, communicate more like a human, so that humans can more easily work with bots, whether you're running them on mobile or web versions or any kind of devices. Okay, and of course bots. All right, so they're used for enhancing bots, not creating them. Okay. It's basically enhancing their conversation skills. It is not a bot framework API. You can't really build bots with it. You should use a real bot framework instead. Okay, how does Dialogflow work? So if you want to get into this, here's some of the buzzwords or vocabulary words you need to know. So an agent is a Dialogflow entity that processes user requests. Okay, and what that means is that you create a whole bunch of intents for your agent. And so an intent is basically what the user says connected to what your app should do for that request. Okay, so you can create or manage these by yourself in the user interface for your Dialogflow agent, or you can do it in code using JavaScript, Python, Java, Ruby, .NET, all the APIs that Google, all the languages that Google APIs support. And you can do this based on text or audio. And then actions and parameters are actually what the bot does. So an action is the action that your app needs to take, and then the parameters are the things that are extracted from the user request. Like, please change my meeting to Thursday. It needs to know Thursday because it needs to go look up the date and all that kind of stuff. And then fulfillment is the answer that our app finally returns to Dialogflow that resolves what that ask is from the user. And then this is displayed as plain text to the user or in a nice UI, or it's read out loud to the user. Okay, so that's how Dialogflow works. So an example is in the other slide deck. Okay, so here's an example of kind of how you can detect what an intent is. So you create a client, and then you end up getting input from the user. You have to turn that input into a query that could be understood. And then once you have a query, you know what you get the fulfillment text that you send out. So all the hard work is in the query of the input. So do all the work. So this is cut and pasted directly from the Dialogflow website. I have the links for you in a moment. So anyway, so that's how that works. All right, so we're going to get to this bot pretty soon. I think I'm running out of slides, which is good. Okay, so I'm going to do why don't I just do the demo? So what I did was I wrote an interesting bot that just queries for weather. So it's pretty easy. And the code looks something like this. I call it a triple threat app because you can actually do this is 3 bots in one. Okay, so there's a Slack bot in here that isn't shown yet. There's a Hangouts Chat bot, which is right here. And then there's a web version, which is down here. So it does all 3. Okay, so what I mean by that is if you go to this, you guys can try it now. So there's the link to it. So it's weskpy, my Twitter handle, -apitest.appspot.com. If you hit return, by default, it looks up the weather for Mountain View. But you can just change this to and zip code equals up here 94105. And then it just changes to San Francisco. So that's the web version of it. Then in the Slack bot version of it, I can just do @weskpy bot and then 8900104 because I was just in Vegas last weekend and it was pretty toasty. So let me. Okay, can you guys see that? And then Hangouts Chat's the last one. So here's another cool bot, by the way. I wrote a where is bot. Can't read it. Basically, you just type in the name of the location and it brings up a Google map because guess what? It's tied to Google, so it's easy to call Google Maps. So West bot, and then another zip code is 1001. Okay, so this is the current weather conditions for New York. So same app for all 3, the web version, the Slack version, the Hangouts Chat version. So that's all in this this app here. Let's go back to it. I know I have another minute, so this gives us just enough time to wrap up. So there's the Slack version. I just couldn't cram it down below, so I had to put it up here. Right? It's all pretty short, right? It's Python code, so you don't have to spend a lot of time and effort doing this. All right? So that's a triple threat, and I think that is it. So let's go wrap up the talk. It's fun, by the way, when you get something working the first time. All right, so to wrap up, where did bots come from? Well, all these messaging apps came about. That's great, but maybe we can do a little bit more than just talk. Maybe we can get work done while we're talking. Or maybe we can get work done without leaving a conversation with our colleagues. Okay, so that's where bots come in. So it can help automate workflows. You can ask for information. Merging information that comes from different sources is useful. So again, think of these as microservice utility apps. Platforms are Slack and Hangouts Chat, but if you want a conversational user interface, then use Dialogflow. It's really easy to use. I would give it a shot. And there's also a code lab for Dialogflow as well, too, that helps you get started. You'll have to do a little bit more JavaScript, so you have to be OK with that. But the main idea is that you can use these things to solve challenges for yourself, for your organization, or your customers. If you want to get to the docs for all of these, so Hangouts Chat is in one place, Slack is in one place. There's a lot of different pieces for Dialogflow because there's a standard version and an enterprise version. And then we also have a Python API. And then there's also how you do Dialogflow with Slack and things like that. So those are some resources I think you might find handy. And that's it. Thank you very much.